Welcome everyone to the next in AI4Iraq's exclusive interview series. My name is Iman, with me is Rian, and today we are thrilled to welcome live from Dubai, Mr. Henri Arslanian, a prominent figure in the world of fintech and cryptocurrency. Mr. Arslanian is currently the co-founder and chairman of NBOX Capital, a pioneering crypto hedge fund based in Dubai, and has previously served as the global crypto leader at PwC, where he built a leading global crypto practice.
With an impressive academic background, Mr. Arslanian holds multiple degrees and is an associate teaching professor at the University of Hong Kong, where he recently finished teaching his world-renowned 36-hour crypto course. Mr. Arslanian has emerged as a respected thought leader and is recognized as one of the most influential individuals in fintech across Asia and the Middle East. Mr. Arslanian is now also the co-host of the Crypto Weekly TV show on CNBC Arabia. Mr. Arslanian, welcome to AI4Iraq.
Thank you very much, and thanks for that very nice intro. It's very kind of you guys.
Mr. Arslanian, it's an honor to have you on the show. The big news over the last few weeks have been Bitcoin's incredible rally to over $107,000, making it, in terms of market capitalization, a larger asset class than silver. What would you attribute to this incredible growth?
Absolutely. I mean, Bitcoin has had a tremendous rise in the last couple of months. I think we should not forget, really, Bitcoin is only 15 years old. And really, the rise that it has seen the last couple of weeks and months has been quite remarkable. I think when we look at the past year, there's been really two key events that took place. One was in January of 2024, the launch of the Bitcoin spot ETFs, which really for an asset that is only 15 years old, we saw the rise of the spot ETF, and that has been a tremendous success. An ETF is basically a traditional financial instrument that allows investors to buy into, that gives them exposure to an underlying. The Bitcoin spot ETF, the first one, has been the most successful ETF launch in history. That's over 30 years of data, 5,000 ETF launches, and the Bitcoin ETF has been the most successful. And this has been a good example of the interest of investors on Bitcoin. And then there's been other drivers as well. For example, many people in many emerging markets, including in Iraq, want to hold an asset that they can actually use, they can trade, and they can send around the world, and that they can control. There's been a lot of changes in the US, for example, with Donald Trump winning the US presidency, where really changing the stance and making the US from being anti-crypto to pro-crypto and pro-Bitcoin. But all of these are actually quite minor changes. The most important change, especially for young people, is that we are witnessing the future of money. We are witnessing the future of finance. In 2-3 generations from now, we're going to look at this period and hopefully interviews like this and say, wow, this was such a game changing in the history of money, where we had an asset like Bitcoin that completely revolutionized finance as we know it. And I find it's an honor to be able to not only see these changes, but also play a role in shaping it.
Thank you, Mr. Arslanian. We've also seen a rally in some of the alternate coins like Ethereum, Solana, and Ripple. How dominant do you foresee Bitcoin being versus alternate coins in the coming years?
The reality is I truly believe that Bitcoin will continue to dominate for the foreseeable future. But we are seeing now the rise of what we call layer 1 tokens, or L1s, including the likes of Ethereum, Solana, and many others are coming up. I think it's important to understand that the use case of Bitcoin and these other alt tokens are very, very different. When it comes to Bitcoin, it's a bit like digital gold. There's a finite number of Bitcoin, only 21 million. Like gold, you can subdivide them. Gold, you can take a bar of gold, make it into a wedding ring, and be able to exchange it. When it comes to Bitcoin, you can divide it up to 8 decimals, called the Satoshi, the smallest number. And like similar to gold, Bitcoin doesn't go bad. You can keep it as long as you want. So there's a lot of similarities between Bitcoin and gold, and people want to use it as a store of value, especially considering what can happen in traditional money financial markets. When it comes to L1s and these altcoins, these are kind of the computer of the future. They're kind of the internet of the future. The internet allows you to exchange information. A lot of these protocols like Ethereum, Solana, and many others allow you to exchange value. And you can have so many cool things on them. For example, one of the great things you can have on platforms like Ethereum or Solana that you just mentioned is our smart contracts. This means you can program transactions on these blockchains and have these transactions actually execute them. And that is game-changing development, and we are just at the early days of this revolution.
I would like to ask one more question. You've mentioned an ETF. Do you think an ETF would happen on the alternate coins too?
Great question. I'm convinced there will be spot ETFs, not only on Ethereum, what we've already seen, but also on Solana and other coins as well. And I'm convinced we're going to see over the coming years baskets of ETFs. You buy a single ETF and it gives you access to an underlying of different cryptocurrencies, from Bitcoin to other tokens like ETH and Solana and many, many others. The important thing, I think for any young person looking at this is right now it's Ethereum, maybe it's Solana, and there's Dogecoin and many, many other coins in the market. The most important thing for any young person is you may love Bitcoin, you may hate it. You may like, other cryptocurrencies, or you may hate them. The most important thing is to at least spend the time to understand them and actually understand how it works and the impact they can have on the future of finance and the future of money, and then make your own decision on how you want to deal with them and how you want to interact with these assets.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Arslanian. You've mentioned that we are seeing more and more institutional investors look and take up large allocations in digital assets. So what role do you envisage institutional investors will play in the future of crypto?
Great question. So what you see in the early days of crypto, it was mainly driven by techies. And then obviously the industry gradually evolved in the last 15 years. We are now seeing increasingly the entry of institutional players in the digital assets space. There's a couple of reasons why we're seeing this. One is increased regulatory clarity. In many countries around the world now, there is some kind of regulatory clarity that provides the rules that actually how this industry operates. Second is that for a lot of institutional investors now, there are instruments that enable them to get access to the asset class, the ETF being a very good example. And third, there is actually genuine interest from institutional investors on a new asset class. In the same way, if you look 30, 40 years ago, emerging markets became a new thing. If you're an investor before in New York, you would never invest in Asia, you would never invest in China. And of course, now every investor has access to Asian markets. Same thing with derivative instruments. Back in the day, there was a time where nobody would even touch derivative instruments, and then they became mainstream. And same thing is going to happen with digital assets, where right now, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are seen as a funky asset class or futuristic asset class. That's the reason it features in videos like these. But in a couple of years, assets like Bitcoin will be very commonly used, very normally, and everybody will own, as part of a diversified portfolio, some Bitcoin as well and other digital assets. And this applies not only to institutional investors, but also for retail investors as well.
Okay. Thank you. What technological innovations do you believe will have the most significant impact on blockchain infrastructure over the next few years? And does AI have a role to play?
Absolutely. So I think that I'm extremely excited about the developments we're going to see in the whole broader blockchain technology. I mean, there's already a lot going on. For example, you look at what's happening in the world of decentralized finance. Today, if I want to open an account at a bank, the bank will look at where my passport is, how much money I have, or where I'm from, and even my country of birth. One of the only thing in the world that you have no control on is where you're born. And unfortunately, that determines how much finance activities you can have just because of where you're born. And in the beautiful world of DeFi, smart contracts don't care. They basically just purely code. So actually, as long as you have digital assets, you're able to go and interact on these digital assets, on these blockchain ecosystems, and conduct financial transactions. That, I think, is a big groundbreaking innovation, and we are now seeing the growth of it. To put things in perspective, today, the volume of activity on DeFi, decentralized finance exchanges, is 5 to 10% of what we see on the big centralized exchanges, the big exchanges that we all know about. So, I expect this to grow over the coming years. But there's also a whole suite of innovations we're seeing. For example, one of them is the world of stablecoins. Today, unlike Bitcoin, where the price may vary, if I send you Bitcoin, you don't know what the price will be a week, a month, a year from now. I can send you a stablecoin, which is digital currency backed by US dollars, for example. So the price is $1 today, will be $1 in a week and $1 in a month. And this is really allowing people not only to use it as a store of value in many parts of the world, but use it for cross-border transactions. To put things in perspective, at the beginning of COVID, there was less than $5 billion in stablecoins. Today, we're over $200 billion. Same thing goes for DeFi. Previously, at the beginning of COVID, on January 1, 2020, there was less than $1 billion in DeFi, and now we're over 150 billion in DeFi. So, and these are just examples of the fascinating world of decentralized, of the digital assets and how fast it's growing.
Thank you, Mr. Arslanian. You've made the move from Asia to the Middle East and have played a big role in the build-out of the digital ecosystem here in Dubai. What inspired you to make the move, and what are the opportunities for countries across the Gulf?
So obviously, I spent many years in China, in Hong Kong, and in Asia, and obviously, I remain very optimistic on the future of Asia as a region in every perspective. I really believe the next couple of years will bring tremendous opportunities in the broader Middle East and the GCC area. For a couple of reasons. One of them is some of the big catalysts that we are seeing around the world. I really believe the Gulf can be as a hub between Asia, between Europe, between the East, and between the West, and between Africa, and as a hub where a lot of these activities will be conducted. And that actually will give a lot of opportunities, not only in hubs like Dubai, in the UAE, but also many countries in the region, including Iraq. For example, I'm personally very bullish, optimistic on the future of Iraq, and I think there'll be tremendous opportunities for people to launch new businesses, to innovate, and to actually build in these new ecosystem. And the beauty is for many of these countries, look at Iraq, for example, Iraq has the opportunity to build without thinking about the old legacy systems, but actually building right now using some of the latest technological innovations and actually being able to build on it. For example, if I was going to launch, let's say, a bank or a financial institution or a tech company, a couple of years ago, you would try to use all the old ways of doing things that were around, whereas now I can completely jump ahead and leap forward and be able to leverage some of this latest technology, whether it's crypto or AI or others as well. So I remain very optimistic on the future of the Gulf and hubs both as a hub, but as a place for innovation and letting new talent flourish, especially that we have such a percentage of the population that is very young.
Thank you. Moving on to Iraq, we've seen several countries take the bold step and utilize Bitcoin as a reserve currency. What advice would you give governments and regulators in Iraq to look at this space?
Well, if this is a controversial topic, of course, I personally I've been in the Bitcoin and crypto space now for 10 years. And I'm a firm believer in the potential, in the role of a decentralized asset as Bitcoin as part of a diversified portfolio. This applies for institutional investors and retail investors. But I also believe that Bitcoin will play a big role in how countries and the reserves that countries hold in the future as well. Over the last couple of months, for example, we've seen numerous countries start not only recognize Bitcoin as legal tender, the country of El Salvador is a good example, but also buy Bitcoin as part of their national reserve, strategic reserves. A good example is the small country of Bhutan. Bhutan has only 800,000 people, but now it has over $1 billion of Bitcoin. That's 1/3 of their GDP. So the country took a big, bold move to start mining Bitcoin and having it as part of their national reserves. I think there's a big discussion right now whether the US will do that. Many countries around the world, from the US to the UK, already have billions of dollars of Bitcoin. The US, for example, has already over $20 billion in Bitcoin. Same thing for China. These are mainly assets that they have seized over the last couple of years. There's many countries like El Salvador now has over 500-600 million. Bhutan has over $1 billion. In my view, personally, if I was a central bank governor, or I was a policymaker of a small or developing or emerging country, I would personally highly consider buying some Bitcoin as part of my national reserves assets that I hold, in the same way that I hold some gold. I will have some gold, I'll have some silver, I will have some US dollars and treasuries and other currencies. I think the risk of not having one, especially for small countries now, is bigger than the potential headline risk of having Bitcoin. And frankly, that risk has gone away now, especially with a change of administration. And I think we should not forget the geopolitical situation of Iraq, for example, and the US support that the country has benefited for a long time. The US was really, until now, very anti-Bitcoin, anti-crypto, and this has changed now since the election of Trump. So I think it could be a very interesting development. And if I was a central bank governor, like I mentioned, I alluded to earlier, you may love Bitcoin, you may hate it, but at least you have a moral and intellectual and fiduciary duty to try to understand it and then decide if buying some would be in the best interest of your nation and your country and your stakeholders.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Arslanian. The economy in Iraq is now stronger than it's ever been, and we're seeing more and more foreign investors look at the tremendous opportunities. Could Iraq build a similar ecosystem to that of its neighbors in the Middle East?
I think any country that has now pretty much a clean sheet of paper that you can start building on has tremendous opportunities. For example, I think at least in the verticals that I focus on, in the world of digital assets, for example, this really gives rise to a lot of new opportunities for a country like Iraq and many others as well. For example, whereas older people, still think with cash, they still think like gold, they still like the old bank account. Many of your viewers, the younger generation, you're very comfortable with digital assets. For example, every time when I teach at the university, I ask my students, what are the most valuable assets that you'll hold? The majority of my students often tell me that some of the biggest, most valuable assets that they hold are video game assets. They're playing Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, Roblox, or whatever, and these are digital assets they own, whether they're skins or any other assets in those things. And I think this is why for the new generation, you are very comfortable with a digital asset. Whereas people my age and my parents' generation want something physical, when they can touch, they can get a statement. My dad to this day asks his bank to send him a paper statement every month, right? So I think for the younger generation, this really allows you to rethink about the future of finance. Really rethink, why do we have money? What is the role of money? And I think one thing that a lot of countries have to do is also think about when you think about the future of money, think about the history of money as well. For example, when I teach my classes on the future of money, I spend a lot of time teaching students about the history of money. For example, for a long period of time, we used to use cattle as a store of value. That was our definition of money. The word capitalism comes from the root word of cattle, for example. That's why it comes from. For many, many years, we used to use salt as money. We used to take salt, put in little bags, and that was used as money. The word salary comes from the Latin saltus, which means salt, because of that reason. So this way, I think we have to really think about why we had money for many years, why it fell down. For many governments over the years, when they took power, they started printing more money. That led to actually what we call quantitative easing, money losing its value. And this is why assets like gold over the years have retained their value, and assets like Bitcoin, which I would argue is a better and improved version of gold.
Okay. At the same time, Mr. Arslanian, despite the mainstream adoption, there continues to be many concerns from the previous episodes in the past. For example, the FTX scandal, which would clearly be at the forefront of many minds. So what can countries and practitioners learn from these past episodes?
It's a great question. Like any industry, there are good players and there are bad actors. Unfortunately, in the digital asset space, as any industry that is fast growing, that is moving fast, there's unfortunately its fair share load of bad actors. What we have seen in the FTX case was a pure case of fraud, pure on, where basically there was the management of the company was basically what we call cooking the books, having a backdoor and using customer assets basically to conduct their own trading, which is a big no-no anybody in any financial activity. You don't need to be a CEO of a financial firm to know that basically using customer assets is a bad thing. It's obviously caused a lot of damage to the industry. Thankfully, since then, there's a lot of changes that have been made. We have increased regulations around the world on digital assets. There's increased best practices as an industry that are in place. And third, the industry players are doing more due diligence and ensuring that these actions do not take place again. So I would say that the risk of another FTX type event happening are quite low. This being said, there will be for sure another scandal in the crypto space. Like in the same way that there are scandals in the traditional finance space every couple of years, there will be another scandal in the crypto space as well in the next couple of years. Would it be like FTX? No, but it'll be a different fact pattern. But the reality is this is always going to happen. We have scandals all the time in traditional finance, in other industries, because again, there's always, unfortunately, bad actors. And I think we have a moral responsibility as members of this ecosystem to call out these bad apples, call out these bad actors, to make sure that we can limit the damage if and when they arise.
Thank you, Mr. Arslanian. We would like to move on, if you don't mind, to ask about you and your endeavors, starting with being co-founder of NBOX Capital.
Correct.
How would you say NBOX Capital positions itself in the current crypto hedge fund market?
Yeah, so the reason we set up nine blocks was really we wanted to deliver to investors on a consistent basis risk-adjusted returns. But we really believe a lot of investors want to have access to digital assets, but via fund managers that are regulated and operate with global best practices and standards. And that's how the idea of launching 9Blocks came to be. It's important to understand that as 9Blocks, we're a crypto hedge fund manager, the industry, it's at its infancy. I mean, to put things in perspective, the total crypto hedge fund industry today manages only $4 billion. To put that in perspective, the traditional hedge fund industry is at 4 trillion. So imagine we're at 4 billion and the traditional hedge fund industry is at 4 trillion. And then obviously the total asset management industry is over 100 trillion. So you can really see that even if this the crypto hedge fund world grows 100x, it's still only a fraction of the size of the traditional hedge fund industry. So we still have a long way to go on that perspective. So I remain very optimistic, and I think the entire industry and the ecosystem around digital assets will continue to grow, whether those are crypto exchanges, the crypto funds, or crypto service providers, or crypto content creators, and that's going to continue growing over the coming years.
Mr. Arslanian, how has your background on traditional finance influenced your perspective on cryptocurrency investments?
Yeah, I discovered Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in 2013. At the time, I used to work for a Swiss bank called UBS, and I remember I used to walk around the bank and say, why do we need all these people? Why do we have so many humans working on these jobs when we can have technology do this kind of role? And that's how I discovered Bitcoin, and I organized my first Bitcoin event in Hong Kong in March 2014. Believe it or not, at a time when I organized this event, it was at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong. The Chamber of Commerce got official complaints saying, why is Henry doing this money laundering event? So this was really in the early days. People used to laugh at me. My nickname became Bitcoin Henry. I became a bit of a joke at the time. But I really believe that this technology had some potential. And for a couple of reasons at a time. First of all, I really believe the financial system that we have is broken in many ways. But I also believe that it was such a big innovation that it's here to stay. If you think about Bitcoin, the big innovation that it provided is that it allows basically somebody, let's say me, to send you value and a digital asset, Bitcoin, without any intermediary. Previously, if I want to send you money, I'm using a bank, I'm using a payment company and others, intermediaries who are debiting and crediting, adding and subtracting on each side what transactions we're doing. When it comes to Bitcoin, the beauty of the innovation, and this is what Satoshi did very well, is allows you to send value from one person to another with no intermediary. And I find that very fascinating. And I really believe that industry was going to grow. When I got into crypto, it was only Bitcoin. We used to call it the Bitcoin blockchain. There was the word blockchain even came around 2015. So it was the very early days of this innovation. And I really believe that it has a big role to play. People should be able to hold an asset if they want to. We should have a finance that is democratized. Like I mentioned before, today, think about, if you're born in many countries of the world, from Libya to Syria to Lebanon to big parts of Africa, banks don't even want to touch you. If you're born in North Korea, for example, nobody will even touch you. The only mistake that you've done is you're born in North Korea, something you have no control on. The same thing works for, if you're a student, for example, nobody wants to bank you because they think you have no money, right? Whereas the beauty of Bitcoin, the beauty of digital assets, it doesn't care who you are, doesn't care if you're man or female, doesn't care where you're born, doesn't care where you live, allows you to give full financial inclusion. And that I think is something that is quite beautiful and powerful. And really I truly, truly believe that we are witnessing now the future of finance. And we're going to look back at this period and say, wow, it was crazy. Bitcoin was only $100,000. Wow, we were just learning about terms like DeFi and NFTs and CBDCs. And then now it's all part of mainstream activity.
Thank you, Mr. Arslanian. So do you believe in the future that us humans would completely rely on cryptocurrency, or do you think that we will rely mostly on cryptocurrency but still with some physical money?
Good question. I think the both will interact side by side. I think Bitcoin is here to stay, and people will use it in the same way we use gold today. But at the same time, I firmly believe in the next 10 years, cash, as we know it, will be illegal. I really believe that many countries around the world will make cash completely illegal. And instead, we're going to have central bank digital currencies, which are digital currencies issued by the central bank and the government. And these decentralized currencies like Bitcoin and centralized digital currencies like CBDCs will cohabitate together and will go side by side. This, I think, gives a lot of opportunities, for any young people that want to learn about this asset class and all you can do on it. I mean, there's going to be tremendous opportunities in the space. Is Bitcoin going to be banned? You can't. In the same way you cannot ban the internet, nobody can stop Bitcoin. I think it's going to be very interesting to see central bank digital currencies. I think many countries in the world will implement CBDCs, including big China, parts of Asia, parts of the Middle East. Other countries like the US, Europe may probably ban it. So it'll be very interesting to see how these two cohabitate. I'm convinced that in the next couple of years, the topic of CBDCs, central bank issued digital currencies, will be a political topic in the same way that's at the last US elections, abortion or gun rights were a topic. Same thing will happen on the topic of CBDCs and privacy in financial transactions.
Okay, and finally, Mr. Arslanian, you recently wrote a book called Decoding Crypto, which is based on crypto for like the younger generation. So what advice would you give to young crypto enthusiasts in Iraq who are looking at this space?
Yeah, this last book that you have, Decoding Crypto, I wrote it because when my other book came out, this one, the Book of Crypto, I got about 200-300 messages from my followers asking me, can you do ones for kids? So that's how we embarked on this journey to write a book for, so not kids actually, for teenagers who want to learn more about crypto. We interviewed about 200 educators and parents about this book, and it took us about 3 years to make it. And the idea is to educate, especially the 18 to 13-year-old age group, on digital assets. And what I found out is actually writing a book for adults is easier than doing one for that age group, because we did it in a comic book format. It needs to be fun, it needs to be animated, it needs to have superheroes, it needs to be rhyme, it needs to be pretty engaging. Because I always say in that book, I'm competing with Instagram, I'm competing with TikTok, I'm competing with YouTube, so I need to make it pretty fun and captivating. But the book came out, it became a best-selling book, it became the #1 new release globally in children's finance books last month. So I'm very proud of seeing the success that it had. There's a lot of work that went in it. And I really believe the reason I did this also because I have an 8-year-old daughter who goes around and tells people that my dad works for Bitcoin. So I was like, I have to fix this. And then she tells her friends that my dad is CEO of Bitcoin. So I was like, I need to really teach her how these things work. So that's how it's all started. But I really believe that it's unacceptable today. And this is the reason I've been teaching for all these years. I find it's very unacceptable that we let students go to school, high school and college and universities, and we do not teach you about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies or blockchain technology, because you are the generation that will be the most impacted. And it's a failure of the education system that we're not training you on these technologies today. I remember about a year ago, I was looking at interviewing an accountant, and I told her, she just graduated, and I told her, how many times in your university accounting program did they teach you about blockchain technology, a technology that will literally make what you do obsolete? And her answer was 0. Same thing in law schools. I used to teach in law schools before, where we shouldn't teach lawyers how to write stupid contracts of 20, 25 pages in old school British English. We should teach them how to code and write them smart contracts and be able to put these notions that we have in code. So I think the world is changing very rapidly on this side. So, if I had a piece of advice to young people, is also, these technologies are here to stay and it will impact you. And the beauty of these, it's a greenfield, right? So having 15, 20 years of financial experience, traditional finance experience, may not matter that much in the new reality that we're going through on it. And the other thing as well is, compared to when I got into crypto, it was very difficult to learn about it. We used to go read technical white papers. It was very geeky. Very nerdy. Now you have tons of content on TikTok, on YouTube, on great podcasts, on great shows like yours, where you were able to educate people on this type of content. And I really hope that more people will learn about the future of money and the future of digital assets.
Thank you, Mr. Arslanian, for joining us today, and we hope to speak to you soon on AI4Iraq.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.